And now what you've all been waiting for, the entire Greek language in one 30-minute video. At least that's what we're aiming for. This is for New Testament Greek review for the final exam of a course that covered the entire Greek language without memorizing all of the forms. So the idea was to learn the functions without necessarily having to memorize all the paradigms, at least for the first semester. Now, I had the idea of putting this to the tune of Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Language. Greeks have long been writing since the Trojans fighting," but that probably wouldn't be as helpful as actually going through the slides, so we'll do it the normal way. Of course, the first thing you should learn if you're learning a language like Greek that uses a different alphabet is you should learn that alphabet. You should learn the pronunciation of the letters. You should learn how to transliterate them, which is to put them into the form of, say, English letters for us. Now, we're using the pronunciation of what's called Erasmian Greek pronunciation. It's a Greek pronunciation that Erasmus came up with in the 1500s. In the 1500s, he was a German. It's a very annoying pronunciation for modern Greeks. Yes, I know modern Greek is much prettier. It's much nicer. This is just conventional for New Testament Greek in most cases. And so I'm going to use the Erasmian pronunciation to the extent I do. Diphthongs are combinations of vowels that we learned very early on. Again, modern Greek pronunciations are different. You'll notice subscripts down here at the end. There's a little iota hanging on the bottom. That iota is significant. It's not right if you write it without the iota. And of course, there are breathing marks. It's important to know that if it's open facing to the left, as in that first alpha, then there's no. You just pronounce it ah as it is. But if it's rough like the C, as in the second breathing mark here, see it's a little C on top. Then you put a H pronunciation in front of it. Ha. We didn't worry about accents, but you should be able to transliterate and know how to use an interlinear. This is an interlinear from interlinearbible.org, which I've found very helpful. These numbers at the top give you the Strong's numbers. If you click on the Strong's number, it'll take you to the dictionary entry. Greek mangles stuff, like agapesen. This is an eta on the front, but if you click on 25, you're going to find that in the dictionary, this word begins with an alpha, agapao. And so the Strong's number helps you figure out what word it's from, even when the word has been somewhat, car wrecked. This is the transliteration on this line. This is the Greek, obviously. Then we have an interlinear in between the lines, English. And then this is the code. So hutos is a adverb, gar is a conjunction, agapesen is a verb, ha theos, ha is the article, tan kosmon is direct object, so forth. Things you should know if you're watching this video, probably. So, that's the alphabet. Part 2, verbs. Verbs have person, number, they have tense, voice, mood, and lexical form. Let's review some stuff here. So person in verbs is first person, second person, third person. First person is I, if it's one of me. It's us, if there are several of us. We're the ones speaking. Second person is who we're speaking to, you or y'all. And then if we're talking about somebody, that's a he, she, it, or in the plural, it's a they. That's person. Number could be either singular or plural, one thing or many things. Lexical form is what we call the dictionary form, the vocab form. If you click on the Strong's number, that gives you the basic word that you look up in the dictionary. Again, Greek changes the form in actual sentences, so you have to figure out a way to know what the word is when it gets mangled. And then, of course, verbs have something called tense, voice, and mood. Let's dig into that. For example, present, active, indicative would be present would be a tense, active would be a voice, indicative would be a mood. Now, I didn't, when I do this, I don't necessarily have students learn a lot of forms, but here is the basic paradigm of luo. Luo, lues, lue, luamen, luete, luusi. I am loosing, you are loosing, he, she, it is loosing, we are loosing, y'all are loosing, they are loosing. And notice that this movable nu doesn't contribute anything to the meaning, but sometimes the third person plural will add a nu to make the sound smooth. An old sound, o, ace, a, amen, eta, usi, might help you remember these in the Erasmian pronunciation. That's not the modern Greek pronunciation. But anyway, Then the verb to be is worth memorizing as well. So emi, e, esti, esmen, este, esi. That's the verb to be. Okay, there are 7 Greek tenses, only 5 of which are really important for reading the New Testament for the most part, but let's go ahead and get them all on the table here. First of all, tense in Greek is more about the kind of action than it is about the timing. In English, we think about tense being past, present, or future. That's secondary in Greek. Some would say it's not even a factor at all. So the kinds of actions, we have 3 basic kinds of action to Greek verbs. You can have continuous action, ongoing action that is. You can have simple, undefined action, or you can have completed action. So the present tense is mostly continuous action. Yes, it can be in the present time, like I am teaching, but you shouldn't assume that present tense is always about present time. There's a tense called the imperfect tense, which has to do with continuous action in the past time. I was teaching. And the fact that it's continuous is why it is built on the same stem, the same basic chassis as the present tense. You just add an augment, which we'll talk about in a second, to the front, an epsilon to the front usually, and then put in special endings on the end. But the imperfect tense is continuous action just like the present. It's just the imperfect tense is in the past time. And the imperfect tense really is primarily about a past tense. Well, it is a past tense. Future tense is mostly about undefined action in future time. In other words, I'm not telling you how it happened. I'm just saying it will happen. Undefined. Aorist tense is undefined action, often in past time. Not always, but its default, let's say, is in the past tense. I wept. Jesus wept is an aorist tense. Something just saying he did it in the past time. So we have present tense, imperfect tense, future tense, aorist tense, perfect tenses. There are technically 3 perfect tenses, although the one to really know is what's called the present perfect. And it's so common, it's the most common, so we often just call it the perfect, even though technically it's the present perfect. The perfect tense means completed action in the past, with it continuing to the present. So I have married Angie now for almost 20 years. That's something that happened, but we're not going to the chapel every day. It's something that happened, it's completed, and it continues. So that's the sense of the perfect tense. I've been married, for X amount of years. It happened, and it's still the case. There is also a past perfect and a future perfect, maybe. So the past perfect would be something like I had taught at Asbury for 2 years before I went to the University of Kentucky. So that's something that started, it continued, and then it ended. That would be pluperfect. The word had often shows up. And then will have taught would be a future perfect. So seven tenses. Present tense, the most important ones to know are the present and the aorist. Present tense, continuous action, maybe in present time. Aorist tense, undefined action, maybe in past time. Then we can throw onto that list also important tenses, but less important, the imperfect, continuous past time, the future tense, undefined future time, and the perfect tense, which is past completed action that is continued to be complete under the present. So, perfect tenses. Okay, so those are the tenses. What are the voices? Well, active is when the subject does the verb. He arose, so he, Jesus, did the verb. He arose. That's active. Passive is when the subject is done by the verb. He was raised. So Jesus is not raising here. He's being raised, and that's passive. Oftentimes with the passive, Greek will use the expression by something, by God. He was raised by God. And it'll use a preposition called hupa or hupo that takes the genitive case, hupo with the genitive, by God, for example. And that's called agency. Agency is the word for that. There is also, Greek, just to make things difficult, there's a middle voice, which is somewhere in between active and passive. A lot of times you should just look it up. So, for example, the word I always use is archo. Archo in the active voice means I rule. Active, I rule. I'm doing the verb. However, in the middle, for some reason, archomai, the middle form of this word, means I begin. It's almost like a completely different word when you put a middle ending on it. Who knew? I mean, I don't know what the secret is. Maybe there's a history here to be sure, but I'm sure the Greeks didn't think about it. They just knew that when they used archimai in the middle voice, it meant begin instead of rule. They knew it deep down in their bones. So some middle voices are just a matter of looking it up in the dictionary, and the dictionary will say this means such and such when it's in the middle. Now, there is this other category called deponent. That's where a word looks middle or it looks passive, but it's actually not in its meaning. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It looks like a sheep, it looks like it's middle or passive, but it's actually an active wolf. The way you know this, just the simple version, is if you click on that Strong's number and you find that in the dictionary it has an oh my, you should think, oh my, it's deponent. Now, not every oh my is deponent. Sometimes it's a real oh my and it's really middle, or it's really passive, as we'll find out when we go into the form semester that comes next. But if in the dictionary the word has an oh my on the end, that tells us that even its base form has a middle ending. And so if something's deponent, then it's active in form, active in meaning, but middle or passive in its form. Now, there are actually genuinely middle words, in which case it may have a nuance like reflexive. If you take the verb hit, Ken hit, and you put it in the middle, it might mean Ken hit himself, all in that middle verb. Or it could mean Ken himself hit. That's intensive. Or Ken hit one another. That doesn't make any sense. But so the middle voice can have a kind of nuance that's somewhere in between active and passive. It's active, but it somehow, as the subject acts, he or she is not only acting, but acting on himself. One textbook I used once upon a time translated the middle, I loose in my own interest, which is pretty canned, but it began to get you a sense of what the middle had. The middle had a connotation of there is some investment in the verb by the subject. Don't worry about that. Okay, there are 4 moods. So there's verbs have tense, voice, mood, person, number, and lexical form. If somebody asks you to parse a verb, those are the things they want you to give you. Tense, mood, voice, person, number, lexical form. We've done person and number. We've done tense. We've done voice. So now we need to know what these moods are. There are 4 moods in Greek. The indicative is the default mode or mood. It's the mood of stating things and asking factual questions. Ken hit the ball. I'm indicating something. It's indicative. Now, of course, maybe he didn't. Maybe it's a lie. So just because it's indicating doesn't mean it's true. But it's the mode of saying is a factual mode. I can ask factual questions. Did you have lasagna for supper? Yes. So that's a factual question, an indicative question. There is a mood called the subjunctive mood. And of course, if you were using interlinearbible.org, the code is there to tell you what it is. Subjunctive is more the mood of probability, should, might. More on that to come in a later power slide. The imperative is the mood of command, again, more to come. And then we'll also talk a little bit more about the optative, very little, about the optative, which is the mood of wish and possibility, could and would, as opposed to might and should. So if the subjunctive is might and should, the optative is more would and could. So we're moving kind of farther away from reality the farther down this list we go. In fact, you might put the imperative last, since anybody with children knows that making a command is the furthest from reality of all of these. But anyway, the optative isn't used much, so I've put it last. So those are the 4 moods, more to come. We talk about there being 6 principal parts to a verb. Luo, luso, elusa, leluca, lelumai, eluthane. These are the 6 principal parts of luo, which means I loose or I destroy. And the reason why we talk about 6 principal parts is because if you know these 6 parts, then you can recognize this word wherever it appears. Because these are the 6 chassis. Every form of this word is built on one of these chassis. So the first one, luo, is the present stem, the present chassis. And off of this present stem is built both the present tense and the imperfect tense. You might say, well, why is the present and imperfect built on the same tense, since present is present time and imperfect is past time? Again, you're thinking English here. The primary sense of tense is kind of action, not timing. Both present and imperfect have the primary sense of continuous action, and so they fit together. Luso is the future tense, at least the future active and middle, and so basically it just adds a sigma. The aorist active puts an augment on the front. That epsilon is an augment on the front, and then adds a sigma alpha. This is in the indicative. And then leluka is perfect active. We'll talk about the form in a second. And then lelumai is perfect middle or passive. And then lastly, eluthane is the aorist passive chassis. So if you know these basic chassis, you can recognize any car. It may have a spoiler on it, it may have special tires, but the basic chassis of any version of Luo is built off of one of these 6 principal parts. By the way, technically the way you know whether something is deponent is whether the form is deponent that you're looking at. So you can technically have a word that's deponent in the present but not deponent in the future, or not deponent in the present and deponent in the future. So technically, what I was saying about deponents and finding oh my in the dictionary form, technically it's a question of whether it has a deponent form in the principal part. Just ignore that if you didn't get it. Moving right along. So next. So here are the basics of recognizing these stems. The present does nothing to its stem. It's just lu and then an ending. So that's the present. Nothing done to it. Wah, wah. The imperfect adds an epsilon to the front of the present stem, and of course it has, I'm leaving the endings out. There are 4 basic sets of endings that I didn't have my class learn this semester. Maybe I would in the future, but for now, I'm leaving endings out. But the imperfect basically adds a epsilon to the front of the present stem. The future adds a sigma, and that is how you make something. You take the present stem, you add a sigma to it, and you've got a future. The aorist adds an augment to the front, which is an epsilon, and then adds a sigma alpha to the root stem. Just reviewing. The perfect reduplicates the front of the root stem. See how what I'm doing is I'm describing what is taking place with these forms. So there's the augment for the aorist. There's the sigma alpha for the aorist. There's the reduplication of the perfect. Gets a little beside itself and adds an epsilon. And there's the kappa alpha. I'm going to tell you in a second that the perfect middle or passive shoves the ending right on the stem. So there's no oh my there. Normally there would be an oh my, but it just crashes right into it. So future adds a sigma, aorist adds a sigma alpha, perfect reduplicates, perfect active adds a kappa alpha to the end of the stem, perfect middle or passive shoves the ending right into the stem, removes the connecting vowel. Aorist passive adds a theta eta to the end of the root stem. Why? Don't ask questions like that. You'll go crazy. But this is the aorist passive. Why is the aorist active like this and the aorist passive like this? I have no idea. Not important. It's just what happened. So this theta eta is the sign of the aorist passive. Okay. Then the future passive adds a sigma to that. Again, I don't know why, but it does. We just have to deal with it. So we have theta eta sigma and then an ending for the future passive. I will be loosed. I've been saying that you augment by adding an epsilon to the front. That's only if the verb begins with a consonant. Verbs that begin with a vowel augment or reduplicate by frying, or lengthening is a better, more technical term. Okay, so that's basically some form. I did give some form this semester, even though most of it has just been learning the functions. So that's most of verbs. We'll come back in a second to some other verb things, but let's switch to nouns now. Nouns in Greek have cases, they have numbers, they have genders. Number is, again, whether it's singular or plural. Gender is, Greek has 3 genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter. It usually has no impact on the meaning whatsoever. It's just a thing that Greek does. Cases. This is important, and it's not something that we do much of in English, so this is a hard point for a lot of us. If a noun is in the nominative case, if the code tells you it's nominative, then probably the noun is functioning as the subject of the sentence, or maybe the predicate nominative of the sentence if it comes after the verb is. Ken is a guy. guy would be predicate nominative. It's a subject in the it's a nominative that's in the after the verb. If a word is genitive in Greek, in the genitive case, probably it's going to add the word of in front of the translation. The dative, if something's dative in Greek, it can mean a lot of things. To or for are the first two to learn. It can also mean in, among, by, or with, but the first two to learn are to or for. If a noun has a dative ending or dative code, then put the word to or for in front of it. Accusative. If something's in the accusative case, that means it is the direct object of the sentence. There are some other possibilities, but let's stick with that for this review. And then the vocative is the case of direct address. So those are the cases of nouns in Greek. I did have my class learn this. These are the forms of a masculine word, in this case logos, or logos, however you want to pronounce it. As, u, o, on, e, oi, on, ois, us, oi. Those are the endings here. You might see those endings on a different word, but those endings tell you, for example, logon is genitive, plural, so of words. Logos is dative, plural, so two words or four words. The two is popping out of the dative ending. The of is popping out of the genitive ending. Okay, so that's a little bit on nouns. The article is the word the, and adjectives describe words. So, know the code. So there's the verb code. The V tells you it's a verb. PIA means present indicative active. 3P means third person plural. This is noun code. N tells you it's a noun. Nominative, masculine, singular. So you should know the code. Art is an article. Nominative, masculine, singular, the. Lots of different forms. Little short two-letter things usually. Adjective, nominative, masculine, singular. These are the code. Prep means preposition. Okay, so back to articles and adjectives. So know the nominative singular article forms. Ha or ho is the masculine. Hey is the feminine, and to is the neuter singular form. There are lots of other forms of 2 or 3 letters, maybe a tau omicron or a tau eta with a subscript, or a 2 tau omicron upsilon. So there are lots of little forms that are the word the, but you should know by now how to recognize that. Articles and adjectives have to agree with the noun they're telling you about in case, number, and gender. Okay, there are 3 basic adjective constructions that we've talked about. There is the attributive construction, which is like the good man. The way to tell this situation is that the will be, most of the time, on the adjective. So it can be in a different order. It can be the man, the good, and it's going to come into English as the good man. But basically, when the translation comes out, the beautiful woman, that kind of a construction, that's attributive. Now, sometimes the noun isn't there, and we have to infer it, like the good, the bad, the ugly. What we're saying is the good people, the bad people, the ugly people. It's inferred. So substantive is pretty much the same as attributive. It's just there's no noun there. You have to come up with it yourself. There's a third construction where you have to stick an is, the man good. And you realize you got to put an is in there. The man is good. Or good, the man. The man is good. Both of those are the man is good kinds of situations. In that case, the verb is implied. The article will be on the noun probably, but not on the adjective. So if the article's on the adjective, that tells you it's attributive or substantive. Okay? Prepositions are easy. They express relationships, in, beyond, through, above, upon. Those are preposition phrases. Prepositions don't change their endings, thankfully. I won't talk about elision. They're little dictators. You will be in the genitive case. So ek, the preposition ek, must have a word in the genitive case after it. Or ace, the preposition ace, must have a word in the accusative case after it. They're not really dictators. It's really more subtle than that, more profound than that. But we'll go for this review and say that the preposition demands that the word it goes with be the noun it goes with or pronoun it goes with be in a certain case. Now what makes things complicated is that sometimes a preposition can take more than one case, and in that case it's almost like learning different vocabulary entries. So meta with the genitive means with, but meta with the accusative means after. It's almost like learning two different words. So prepositions, the nice ones are the ones that only go with one case, but there are some that go with more than one case. And of course the really nightmare ones are the ones that go with three different cases. Prepositions. Pronouns. A pronoun is a word that stands in place of a noun, and there are, unfortunately, 9 different types of pronoun in Greek. The most important is, of course, the personal pronoun, and I have them here in their nominative forms: I, you, we, y'all, and he. Those are personal pronouns. Now, if you put the word the on autos, then it becomes same. Autos with an article on it means same. Sometimes we call that a different pronoun. The identical pronoun, it's not really a different word, but we can call it identical pronoun if you really want to. If you put a personal pronoun in the nominative case, then it's intensive. It translates with self. So himself, herself, I, myself, and so forth. When a personal pronoun, a PPro, when a PPro is in the nominative, it intensifies the subject, whatever the subject is. And when it's extra, so in 1 Thessalonians 5:23, you might at first think that it's saying, may he, the God, sanctify you. But if you know that when it's extra, it means something self, then you can translate it, may God himself sanctify you. So the autos there, autos hatheos, the God, he, that doesn't make any sense. It's extra. It's unnecessary. And so when autos is unnecessary, it intensifies whatever noun it goes with. And we would say God himself instead of God he. So when a personal pronoun is in the nominative, it intensifies the subject. It selfifies the subject. When it's extra, it selfifies whatever noun it's going with. And we call that the intensive use of the pronoun. Okay. Now, demonstrative pronoun, this, that, these, those, basically a matter of vocabulary, knowing how to recognize this word, this or that. Relative pronoun translates as who, or which, or that. I am the God who heals you. That's a relative. Who heals you is a relative clause, and who is a relative pronoun. Interrogative pronouns, tis and ti, when they have the accent, ask a question. Who, who when it's masculine or feminine. What, maybe when it's neuter, and then that little form ti can also mean why, and those are the interrogative pronouns. Who has heard our report? Indefinite is that same word but without the accent, and of course it's not just this form I have here. It declines. It has more than one form. We'll learn next semester. But without the accent, this word is the indefinite pronoun. Someone, something. The reflexive pronoun is a particular kind of word that reflects back to the subject. So, I hit myself. That's myself there is a reflexive pronoun. It's something self that points back to the subject. So the subject is she. She hit herself would be the reflexive pronoun. We hit ourselves would be the reflexive pronoun. So reflexive pronoun, boing, bounces back to the subject with the self. Finally, the last kind of pronoun is the reciprocal pronoun. This is just a vocabulary word. Alone means of one another, because that's genitive. If it's dative, it means to or for one another, and if it's accusative, it's one another is the object. So these are the 9 different kinds of pronoun. What is their code? PPro covers personal pronoun, identical, which is when it means same, or intensive when it selfifies. All of those are going to be called PPro in the interlinearbible.org code. DemPro is a demonstrative pronoun. So tuto is the word this, and akanos is the word that. Those are demonstrative pronouns. RelPro is the relative pronoun. So for example, here are the nominative forms, nominative singular forms for the relative pronoun. Has is who when it's a he. Hey is the nominative when it's a she. And then ha means what or that which or something like that. Relative pro. iPro is used in interlinearbible.org for both interrogative and indefinite pronouns. Who as a question, or someone as an indefinite. And then RefPro is used for the reflexive, not reflective, reflexive. Sorry, that should be reflexive. How to, for example, is the of himself. And then RecPro is reciprocal pronoun. I mentioned alone. Okay, those are pronouns. They're annoying because they're just little details, but there's nothing really that complicated about them. Not so with participles. Now we're talking. We're past the midterm exam now. Actually, the tense and voice stuff was past the midterm exam in my course this semester. But now we get into the participles. Now we're getting a little bit hairier, shall we say. Let's call participles ing words, just for starters, although we won't end there. The code, at least in interlinearbible.org, it puts them under verbs, which fine, we'll live with it, even though technically they're verbal adjectives. But the code has a middle P. That red P tells us it's a participle. Now there are starter translations that I give. So if it's a present active participle, just try the ing form, teaching. If it's a present passive participle, try being, and then you're going to have to kind of use your knowledge of English to figure out what goes there. So we don't say being teached in English. We say being taught. And so, just use your common sense, your common English sense. So present active, teaching. Present passive, being blanked. Aorist active, having blanked. So in this case, having taught. And then aorist passive, having been taught. So these are our rated G starter translations of participles. And we'll start just by getting it on the page, taking whatever it is, and getting that starter ing translation out there. But there are three basic uses for the participle. First, we ask. So these are the three questions I tell students to ask. Is there a to be verb near the participle? If so, then its function is what's called periphrastic. Is there an article on the participle? If so, then it's adjectival. And of course, unfortunately with Greek, sometimes things get separated from their articles, and you have to kind of, wait a minute, there's an article here. What does it go with? Oh, that's 4 words away. But anyway, if there's an article that goes with it, it's adjectival. If there isn't an article that goes with it, it's probably adverbial. Okay, let's unpack these three primary uses of participles. We'll start with, let's start with periphrastic. So this next bullet deals with periphrastic. So most periphrastics are just like English. So eimi didaskon is I am teaching. It's just like English. It's a to be verb, eimi, with a participle, didaskon. Okay, so that's nice. But the periphrastic uses with perfect participles. So didaskon here is a present participle. When we have a perfect participle with a to be verb, that's where it gets a little crazy. So like I am having taught is not good English. We're going to have to play with it a little and come up with something like I have taught. Here's a really bad one. I was having been taught. What are you going to do with that? Well, we're going to come up with something like I had been taught. So when the periphrastic is used with a perfect participle, it gets a little crazy, but we can get over it if we just kind of learn that feel of how to get from I was having been taught to I had been taught. Usually when you have a past tense with a past tense, we're going to go with had. Past had is what I used to say. Okay, Ken's rule. So we've got our starter translation. How do we get to the next step in our translation? So we started with the starter. How do we get going to the next step? So here's the rule that I didn't actually come up with. It's plagiarized. I don't even remember where it came from. But if the participle has the article, use who or that. If it doesn't, try while or after. There you have it. To get us from the starter rated G translation to the PG translation, let's go ahead and use Ken's rule. If the participle has the article on it, use who or that, because it's adjectival. If it doesn't, try while or after, because it's adverbial. Maybe. Okay, so if a participle has the article, it's adjectival. Use who or that. This is the man, the teaching Greek. We would not say it that way in English. This is the man teaching Greek. We would say this is the man teaching Greek. Or even better, this is the man who is teaching Greek. Notice teaching, the participle, had an article on it, the. And so I used who. This is the man who teaching Greek. Still not quite there. This is the man who is teaching Greek. Okay? So that's how that works with the adjectival ones. Now, adjectival participles could also be substantive. And by that I mean sometimes the noun it goes with isn't there, and you have to come up with it. In John 3:16, it says, all the believing one might not perish but have everlasting life. Well, that's bad English. All the believing, there's no noun there. So I have to come up with one. Everyone, all the ones who believe, everyone who believes. So I took a participle that has an article on it, and I put who in there. All who believe, but it's singular. So I might say everyone who believes, and there we have it. Everyone who believes in him will not perish. So that's a substantive participle that has an article in John 3:16 right there. Okay, adverbial participles. If the participle doesn't have the article, it's probably adverbial. Now, here's the bad news. Sometimes the context makes it clear that even though this participle doesn't have the word the on it, it still should be translated as if it had the word the on it. But if the participle doesn't have the article, probably it's adverbial. Now, when we're in beginning Greek, a lot of times we just stick with temporal, what are called temporal participles. And so we put the word while in front of it if it's a present participle, or the word after in front of it if it's an aorist participle. There's in Hebrews 1, it says, having made a purification for sins, he sat at the right hand of God. You can actually stick the word, it's an aorist participle, having made atonement, having made purification. You could stick the word after there because it's an aorist participle without an article. After having made a purification, he sat down. Then you can bring it on down to the smoothest translation. After he had made a purification, he sat down. You can't just go straight into English. Well, you can go straight into English, but sometimes it's really bad. So if the participle doesn't have the article, it's probably adverbial. One of the options is, therefore, that it's being used temporally, and you can stick a while or an after in front of it. But there are many other options. So sometimes you could stick an although in front of it. God, having spoken in many and various ways in the past through the prophets, you can put an although in front of it. God, although having spoken, and then bring it on home, although he spoke formerly. Also, causal can mean because. Having been justified by faith, we have peace with God. Because, I can hear a because hiding there. Because we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God. Conditional if. How will we escape having neglected such a great salvation? Can you hear the if? How will we escape if we have neglected such a great... So you can see that these are different adverbial nuances a participle can have. Purpose, it can be purpose, it can be other things. It can be instrumental, by means of, even be a command. The Great Commission is a imperatival adverbial participle. Having gone, make disciples of every nation, usually translated go and make disciples. And that's a fine translation. And it comes from an adverbial participle, a participle that doesn't have the article. Okay, 8. We're almost done. Infinitives. An infinitive is a to-word, to dream, the impossible dream. So you put a verb, you put the word to in front of a dream, in front of a verb, to in front of to in front of a verb, and you have an infinitive. Sometimes infinitives are so easy to translate you don't even notice them. They just complete the meaning of the verb. I am beginning to teach. You just translate it that way. Or he is about to go to the store. To go, you expect an infinitive. Most of the time, you're going to translate an infinitive, and it's going to be just fine. Sometimes they function as nouns, like when I said to dream, the impossible dream. That's an infinitive being used as a noun. Paul does this in Philippians 1, where he says, to live is Christ. To live is the subject of the sentence. What is Christ? To live is Christ. So we call that a gerund in English, not that you need to know. but sometimes infinitives function as nouns. These first two you're going to translate just fine without even noticing it, if you know that an infinitive is a to in front of a verb. But sometimes they're using indirect quotes. He said him to go to the store. We don't talk like that in English, but they did sometimes in Greek. He said him to go to the store comes out as he said that he was going to the store, or something like that. Okay? Now, sometimes infinitives play games. The ones that I have here, you're going to figure out fine. It's just common sense. But there are some crazies, and infinitive plays some games. So there are causal games. If you have the preposition dia with the article the, ta, on an infinitive, it's going to come out something like on account of the to believe. And you're going to have to and come up with because he believes or something like that. The subject, quote unquote, of an infinitive is going to be in the accusative case. So on account of the him to believe is going to come out in English something like because he believes. So that's a causal game that infinitives play. Infinitives also play purpose and result games. So ace ta with an infinitive, pros ta with an infinitive, the genitive article with an infinitive, all of these are going to be translated something like in order to. So ace ta auton pistuein, unto the him to believe, is going to come out in order that he might believe. Again, don't ask why, just memorize that if you have an ace ta with an infinitive, a pros ta with an infinitive, a genitive article with an infinitive, it's going to translate in either in order that or with the result that. Then finally, there can be timing games, temporal games. Ento with the infinitive translates as while doing something. But ta with an infinitive translates as after doing something. Pra tu with an infinitive or prine with an infinitive translate as before doing something. Again, these are just games that infinitives play. We just memorize them and translate accordingly. We're close to the end now. Now remember I said there were 4 moods that verbs took: indicative, subjunctive, imperative, and optative. Let's dig into the subjunctive mood a little bit more detail now as we come down to the end of Greek. So sometimes this mood, this subjunctive, so the code will say this verb is subjunctive. What does it mean? Well, a lot of times when you have a subjunctive verb, it's because there's a conjunction that, like the preposition has said, you will be subjunctive if you're going to be with me. So the conjunction hina or hapos that introduces a purpose clause or a result clause in order that he might go to the store, with the result that he went to the store. Whenever either of these conjunctions, hina or hapos, is used, the verb that goes with them, somewhere, there's subjunctives are coming, there's going to be a subjunctive somewhere later on in that clause because hina demands that there be a subjunctive, at least in New Testament Greek. Sometimes the subjunctive can be used with the conjunction an to introduce a conditional clause. This is a if clause. If Ken gets here on time, we'll go to the movie. That's a conditional clause because what if Ken doesn't get here on time? But if an is there, then a subjunctive is coming. A subjunctive is coming. There's going to be a subjunctive later on in that clause if an is around. There's some others. So hatan is a temporal relative clause or a temporal clause whenever. Notice on is like a little bomb. Boom! It throws everything up in the air. When you put onto a word or when on is in a sentence, everything becomes more contingent. So you take hate, which means when, and you stick on it, and it becomes whenever. You take if, and put on it, it becomes an if. But anyway, all of these conjunctions introduce a clause that will definitely have a subjunctive verb in it. You could take the relative pronoun has and put that little on somewhere nearby, and it goes from who to whoever, what's called a conditional relative clause. So has introduces has is a relative pronoun that introduces relative clauses. But if you put on somewhere in the mix, then it becomes a conditional relative. It goes from who to whoever. You can have a subjunctive question. So if you put a semicolon, it's a question mark in Greek, after something, in a question, and then if you have a subjunctive in it, a subjunctive question is a should question. So it's not did we go to the store, it's should we go to the store. becomes a should question. Are we to go to the store? That's a deliberative question because you're deliberating it. And because you don't know, because you're only discussing the probability of doing it, it's used in the subjunctive mood. It's not an indicative question. It's a subjunctive question. A subjunctive verb with a question mark nearby. So uses of subjunctive so far. Sometimes the subjunctive verb goes because there's a little dictator conjunction that said, you will be subjunctive. And so the verb's put in subjunctive because it follows one of these dictator conjunctions here. But the subjunctive can also be used with a question to ask a should question. Then there's also what's called a hortatory subjunctive, a let us subjunctive. That's a first-person plural subjunctive that asks something like, let us now go to Thessalonica. That's a first-person plural subjunctive that indicates a kind of command. Let us go to the store and buy lettuce. Anyway, so that's a hortatory subjunctive. When the subjunctive is in the first-person plural, it may be a hortatory subjunctive. You can also make a certain kind of prohibition with a aorist subjunctive. So there are two words for not. Is used with the indicative, and may is used with the subjunctive. So may with an aorist subjunctive is a way of saying don't do it. Don't steal. You can use may with the aorist subjunctive to make a prohibition. Since I'm talking about prohibitions, there are two other ways to make a prohibition. You can use may with the present imperative, which means don't you be quenching the spirit. So it's going to have a more of a continuous flavor if you use may with the present imperative. And then another way to make a prohibition is to use the future tense. You will pick up your clothes. If our mothers ever told us that was a command. Okay, so functions of the subjunctive. The subjunctive mood is used with certain conjunctions. It's used to ask should questions. It's used in the first person plural to say let us do something, and then it's used in certain prohibitions. So there's a little bit more on the subjunctive mood. While we're at it, let's talk about the imperative mood and the other mood, the optative mood. So imperatives have to do with commands. Do this, do that. Now, as I just mentioned, you can also do commands with the future indicative, you will come to class, or the hortatory subjunctive, let us go to Thessalonica. These are both other ways to make a command. Now, Greek couldn't just let it go easy. So Greek has a third-person imperative that's like, let him hear, let her go. That would be a third-person singular kind of command. And the only way to get that into English is to stick the word, let him do it in front of it to try to help us, get a sense of what it's saying. Lastly, the optative. The optative is not important, relatively speaking, but it expresses wish. May God sanctify you. It can also indicate potential, if God would wish, to save us. So don't worry too much about the optative, but remember there are four moods that verbs can have in Greek. They can be indicative mood, subjunctive mood, imperative mood, or optative mood. Okay? That leaves us very close to the end. So there are independent clauses. That a clause has a subject and a verb. This is what distinguishes it from a phrase. A phrase doesn't have a verb in it, at least not a kind of indicative kind of verb or subjunctive kind of verb. So dependent clauses are clauses that are telling us about the main clause of a sentence, but they don't stand on their own. So take this clause. If he gets here on time, that is a clause. It has a subject and a verb, but it's not a sentence. And so clauses like that are called dependent clauses. And there are a number of them, and let me just summarize some of them. So in Greek, you can have a noun clause that begins with haughty when it means that. And so he said that he was going to the store. That he was going to the store all serves as the direct object. He said what? He said that he was going to the store. All of that's functioning grammatically like one word. It's a noun clause. The whole clause is functioning like a direct object, like a noun. You can also use haughty to introduce direct quotations. He said, I'm going to the store. And in most Greek New Testaments, it's going to capitalize the first word of a direct quotation like that, where you're giving the exact words the person said, the things that we would put in quote marks. Most Greek New Testaments are going to begin with a capital letter to signal that that's happening. That's one kind of clause in Greek. Causal clauses would be like when haughty is translated as because. Again, you would have translated these just fine without knowing what to call them, but there might be some evil examiner or competency giver that wants you to be able to identify what kinds of clauses these are. So when haughty means because, it's introducing a causal clause. You can have result clauses with the result that. Hosta is one way to introduce a result clause. Hosta will take an indicative verb. Almost all of these that I'm telling you now take an indicative verb unless I tell you otherwise. Hosta can also do an infinitive, so that him to be very afraid. That would be another kind of hosta construction with an infinitive. Conditional clauses. There are 4 basic kinds of conditions in Greek. The first one is the assume it's true if. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. That's going to use the conjunction a with an indicative verb. Now, the if I mentioned is on. If you want to say more conditional, contingent if you get here on time, then we'll go. Those are the 2 most important, that is, conditional clauses to know in Greek. There are also timing clauses, temporal clauses, like hate with when. I've talked a little bit about that already. Relative clauses with who, forms of has. I've talked about these already. Purpose clauses are usually subjunctive, introduced with hina. There you have it, the most important clauses in Greek and the kinds of conjunctions that typically introduce them. That brings us to the final slide and some final details. So, I should mention, maybe before I go, that you can put adjectives into a ER and an EST situation. So big is the normal adjective, big door. That's called the positive degree of an adjective. But you can say it's a bigger door or the biggest door ever. That's the comparative degree of an adjective and the superlative degree of an adjective. The code in interlinearbible.org, after the adjective stuff, puts a -c or a -s. -c if it's in the comparative degree and a -s if it's in the superlative degree. And now for the final of the final. There are 2 special kinds of questions I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about. One is a question that expects a yes answer. It's going to begin with the word "oo," such as when Paul says, "Am I not an apostle?" Yes, Paul, you're an apostle. That statement in 1 Corinthians 9:1 begins with "oo." But you can also ask a question expecting a no answer. And that is going to begin with the other word for not, which is may. And so when Paul says, "All aren't apostles, are they?" In 1 Corinthians 12, that question begins with may. And this has been The Entire Greek Language by Ken Shank.